welcome to the Sci-Fi Musical Podcast. I'm your host, Andi Lee Carter.
And I'm your co-host, Jonathon Lynch.
And today we're going to talk about two sci-fi musicals with the theme comics and anime. So first we're going to talk about Starmites, and then we're going to talk about Death Note.
The power of the written word right in front of us.
Jonathon, what did you think about these two musicals?
I love them. They're very opposite kinds of shows for me. One is just good, cheesy, delicious fun. And the other, Starmites. I'm kidding about that. Starmites is the good, delicious fun. Death Note is serious. And it strikes me that, like I was saying just a moment ago, they're both about the power of the written word, where even though they are both about comics or based on comics or about the things that we sort of like take from writing and from analyzing our thoughts that way, the results are incredibly different. And it's wonderful that we have a musical theater ecosystem that can support both.
Absolutely. And I really love both too. And I was surprised as I was doing this research in the past couple of days, kind of refreshing my memory on both shows, how similar they are in a lot of ways. So I'm excited to talk about that. But first, let's talk about Starmites.
Yes, great.
So Starmites was written by Barry Keating, with the music and lyrics by Barry Keating, and a book by Stuart Ross and Barry Keating. It was first off Broadway in 1987, and then it opened on Broadway in 1989. And it ran for about 60 performances, and it actually got 6 Tony nominations.
That's amazing.
Including Best Musical, but it didn't win any of them, unfortunately. Unlike today, where a lot of these small musicals are winning Tony Awards, back then it was all the big spectacle musicals.
It was a very different time. I will point out, though, that the lead won a Theater World Award for her work on the show. So, this is the award-winning musical Starmites.
It is award-winning, but unfortunately it did not win any Tonys, even though it was nominated for 6. So, do you want to talk about the plot?
Spoilers! Spoilers! Spoilers!
We give a spoiler alert for all of our episodes because we're going to tell you about what happens in these musicals.
And we kind of can't tell you about what happens without spoiling the endings of some of these. So if you don't like spoilers, sorry, that's just how it's going to be with this one.
That's right. Some of these shows you can't really find anymore. So, maybe it's okay.
Yeah, if there's no way to watch it, there's no way to be spoiled for the content that does not exist.
Exactly. So enjoy our spoilers.
So the way that I see this plot is that it is an original musical. So it isn't necessarily based on a specific comic book. But I feel like what the writers were trying to do is they were trying to give it as much of a comic book sensibility as possible, which is great. I love it when one medium is trying to use the sort of storytelling conventions of another medium. That just is delightful to me. The plot of the show is about a girl named Eleanor who is from our real life world, and she's a comic book nerd. So right away, we're talking about female lead of a big musical in which the girl is a nerd. And that is such a rare thing. I don't think I can name any other musicals out there at all that have that sort of a thing going on. But her mom is like, hey, Eleanor, stop living in the fantasy world of your comic books. We agreed that I would sell them off so that you can start taking things more seriously about your life. In response, she travels to the world of inner space where she meets the Starmites and goes on adventures with them and encounters the villain Shaka. It's a bit of an isekai since we're talking about Japanese cultural conventions as well. And then meets her double, Bizarbara. And yes, I say double because it is double cast, is the same actress as both.
Bizarbara, yes. And in this inner space world, she's known as Milady.
And in the end, they kind of swap places where Eleanor Milady decides to live in inner space and fight villainy with the Starmites, where Bizarbara comes back to the real world. Bizarbara, who is sort of established as being very shy and very mousy and wants to take things a bit more seriously. It seems like a better fit for both of them to swap places like that. And that's how it ends, happily ever after, with the villains defeated and the heroes triumphant.
And there is a lot of swapping places with the double casting, having the same actress playing Bizarbara in Eleanor / Milady, there's a lot of Shakespearean switching places like Who's Who and, a little love story about space punk who's in love with Milady, but he's supposed to marry Bizarbara, but like technically it's the same person.
And there's a huge amount of prophecy involved, like, oh, it's the prophesized one will do this and then this happens. And they even make a joke out of it at one point. They're like, wait, which prophecy are we talking about today? And they're like, the prophecy where you shut up kind of a thing. It's great.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite moments or songs from the show, would you say?
Most of my work outside of doing podcasts is as a musical theater educator, musical theater music director, and pianist. And I got to say that the song Superhero Girl shows up every now and then from my students. Usually it's because they're assigned to discover musicals that they wouldn't normally encounter. Like, it's not Mean Girls, it's not Smash, it's not Wicked. And so they dig a little deeper, and sometimes they find Starmites, and sometimes they see Superhero Girl, and I'm like, wow, this is actually really cool. And for the kind of like rocker musical theater type, it shows them off very well. As I was listening to this, it could just be that I was sort of primed to hear that one and be like, oh, I know this one, and it's a total bop.
I also love Superhero Girl, and I love that there's a lyric using Stan Lee. So like it really shows a love for comic books and comic book culture. And especially the fact that it's a girl singing, like a young girl singing about comic books and how much she loves them is just really nice to see that, especially in the 80s. It's not something that I think a lot of young women were seeing at that time. So I think it's a really important story.
Yeah, I feel as time has gone on, the sort of comic book culture has become more and more mainstream. I think a lot of it is because of Marvel and the MCU and the billions and billions of dollars that they started to rake in with that. And so I think that it's more acceptable to be that. We see more examples of that in the media now, although I would still say that it's pretty rare in musical theater necessarily. So seeing that like in the culture at all, let alone in musical theater, I think is pretty remarkable of the show.
Yeah, I really love that. And I also love the song Reach Right Down. I think it's a really fun gospel-y group number towards the end where everyone's trying to get Eleanor ready to go and accept her sacrifice. There's something about fulfilling the prophecy, and it's just really fun and really catchy. And also there's a showstopper with Diva, who is the queen of inner space. And when she comes out and just gives us like full on Ursula, I really love that number as well.
Can we talk about how delightful some of these names are for a second? Like,
oh yeah,
Bizarbara, Diva. Like my favorite like featured ensemble name here is Cannibal. It's perfect. No notes, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and also, can we talk about the cruelty?
Yes, please talk about the cruelty. I love it.
So the cruelty is like a weapon that is supposed to cast spells to save the universe, but it's basically shaped like a giant aluminum electric guitar. And it's just hilarious. I love the level of camp that's in this show and just the silliness that's involved, and the heightening of everything is really fun.
One more thing I want to talk about with Starmites, and just something I find fascinating, but the lyrics of the songs. When we think, okay, so what's taught in the musical theater schools is that the lyrics should be pertaining to the character, and they should have a certain rhyme scheme to them in a certain way that like the lyrics grow and change because the character is also growing and changing throughout the course of the plot. These have lyrics that are so based in kind of rock idioms that there are like literal yelps and howls that are notated into the score, like just repetition of vowel sounds found in words that are very prominent in pop music, but not very prominent in most musical theater tunes. So when I'm saying this is a musical that's using the storytelling conventions of comic books very liberally, I also think that it's using the storytelling conventions of pop music as well when we talk about how the lyrics are working in it, because it's not perfect rhymes and the character who is in full control of their capacities of thought developing toward a surprising but inevitable conclusion. These are characters who are often living in one very particular moment and who want one thing so badly that they're unchanging in their desires sometimes.
Yes, and I do think that also speaks to something that comic books do and that they're doing in this show too, is they're looking at characters who are more archetypal than fully realistic type characters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's a much more heightened show. That's why it feels very campy, because the characters are not super realistic, except maybe Eleanor. They're not super grounded, which is okay because they're in this fantasy world. They're in this other world. So everybody feels sort of unbound, like they're from a comic book. And so they don't feel real. And that's okay because they're not real. I'm putting my air quotes on. And I think the way that the lyrics and the music works to tell us that is on purpose, and lets us know that we're in an unreal space, a new world that isn't part of the real world.
And you mentioned that Eleanor is sort of the most, and I'm air quoting here, real character in the show. And I think that she also functions as audience surrogate, the more quote unquote normal place where an audience can attach themselves and find a way into the rest of the glorious, messy, beautiful chaos of the rest of the show. It's also telling to me that the publishers of this show, yes, they do have the original version that you can still do today with your company. I assume all of my listeners out there have a theater company that they run. They've got 2 other versions of the show out there as well. They've got the high school version of it, and they've got the grade school version of it. So the fact that even the publisher saw that this would be economically viable to have different versions of it for different audiences means that there's still some interest in doing this show now. And if you think about the kinds of things that high schools and grade schools need, like they need big casts, they need shows that are just lots of fun, things that are maybe a little bit over the top, things that have a cool rock score to them. So this might not be something that like all the kids are clamoring for and they know nowadays, but I guarantee like a couple rehearsals in and they're going to just have a blast with this one and just take it as far as they can.
That's true. And it's really timeless too. Even though it's also very 80s, the themes in it are very timeless because it's about acceptance. It's about wanting to find your place in the world and wanting to figure out who you are. And so I think those are great themes for young people to explore through musical theater. So I do think it's a great show for young performers to do.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else that really makes it stand out as a sci-fi show?
If we're really breaking down like kinds of sci-fi that we're dealing with, and I think that we're pretty inclusive about what we would count as sci-fi, like sci-fi, fantasy, speculative fiction, all of those kinds of things would fall under the umbrella of sci-fi. I would also think that we are at least open to stranger interpretations of science fiction. One definition that I've heard is that science fiction is when humans are encountering new technology and about how humanity reacts to them, or even individual humans react to this new technology. And that's a wonderful definition if you think of things like Star Trek, if you think of things that involve robots or wormholes in space or things like that. The definition gets a little bit bonkers if you think that Singing in the Rain counts as sci-fi because it's these humans encountering the new talkie technology in movies and how do they react and what happens with that. I think when we think about science fiction, we think about a lot of fictional technology involved in this or not. In terms of Starmites, there are advanced technologies present in this show. So like the cruelty, for one, is something that we wouldn't necessarily see in our day-to-day lives. Clearly, this is some sort of advanced technology. But whether inner space is more power, like the space is in the title, but I'm never really clear if it's like a different planet or a different dimension or inside your own mind, a journey there. So a dream landscape maybe, which it could very well be as well. So whatever's powering it, though, clearly this character is going to a different place. The character it's a portal fantasy. It's a different land with different rules that they're encountering. And the character grows and adapts and changes to this different landscape and comes back maybe with a new name and personality, or maybe they stay in this new land forever. So in terms of the sort of technological aspects of it, like, yeah, they're there. I think that we could say as much that magic powers any of this as much as like technology does. I think that it's as much like inner space and rules of the universe behaving very differently as much as it is anything else.
Right. Yeah. I was trying to, on my blog, define more specifically, like, what is this genre? And besides just saying it's comic book or it's sci-fi, it really is hard to define. But I agree with you. Like, to me, it's about, because she's traveling to another place through a portal to another sort of dimension or world that is different from what we consider the real world, that she seems to be living in the same world that we live in, with the rules that are the same as ours. And then there's rules that are different in this inner space other world. I think that that's what makes it sci-fi or fantasy. It could be considered fantasy, which I also am okay with lumping that in with sci-fi in what we're talking about. I think the science part is where, yeah, when we're talking about space, when we're talking about technology, I think that is where it becomes more of the sci part of the.
Yeah, and it's a real thin line anyway. I mean, like Star Wars, there are spaceships and there are like mechanical things going on. You have droids, but like you have the Force, which is magic, and you have these space wizards running around with these space swords. So yeah, like it's technology, but it all seems to be based on hand wavy and magic, like whatever it needs to be. And I say that with love. I love Star Wars. And there's the whole thing about, like, you know, the Arthur C. Clarke quote, which I'm sure we'll bring up every few episodes here, that like at a certain point, it's hard to distinguish between magic and sufficiently advanced technology. So like, where's the line? It's something along those lines. I think that that's sort of why we're more inclusive about what counts as science fiction, because at a certain point, it's just like, well, different rules. Let's go with it.
Absolutely. And, you know, and I always say, like, science fiction is what we say it is. So
yes.
if it's on this podcast, it's sci-fi.
Which, oddly enough, is what we can say about a musical as well. What is a musical? It's what we say it is. Yeah, Mozart, sure, he was a musical theater writer. Well, we can roll with that.
The Magic Flute, sure.
Guardians of the Galaxy, that's a musical. Absolutely. It uses music for character development. Let's go.
So let's move on to Death Note by one of my favorite musical theater writers, Frank Wildhorn, with lyrics by Jack Murphy and a book by Ivan Menchel. It started development in 2013, and there was a workshop in New York in 2014 and 2015, and then it moved quickly to Tokyo, where it was extremely successful in Japan and also Korea in 2015. And then it's just been like killing it in Asia for years. And recently in London, they did a concert in 2023 that was a hit. There has been rumor that it might come back to London and maybe even New York. I'm waiting with bated breath. There's also rumor that a cast recording has been recorded. And yes, it's true, there is a cast recording that's floating around the interwebs, but it hasn't been officially released.
It is not hard to find, though, dear listeners at home. It is not hard to find this cast recording.
It is not. But let's talk about Death Note, which is based on the well-known manga of the same name. And then it's also been anime. And there has been many different media made from this story, including full TV series and several movies. I got a chance
and gobs of fan fiction.
Oh, yeah. I got a chance to see one of the sort of Americanized movie on Netflix and some of the animated TV show. But wow, the musical itself, I haven't seen, but just heard the concept album in English and some of the other language songs, just the music from it. Obviously, I can't understand the other languages, but it's really great and I really love it. So do you want to try to talk about the plot?
Yeah, let's do this. Spoilers! 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 Light Yagami is a high school student, and his whole thing is he hates crime. It just gets under him. His dad is a police officer, and Light seems to have inherited that capacity to just hate crime and disorder and things like that. One day, there are these two, like, gods of death. They're called Shinigami. And they're arguing about like, okay, like, are people good? Are humans bad? Like, what's going on here? And so one of the Shinigami, whose name is Ryuk, he comes up with a scheme where he drops this notebook in the middle of the street. And this notebook is called a death note, like death notebook. And there are instructions at the front of it. So whoever gets it, like, they can understand how it works. But basically, if you write somebody's name down in this death note, then they're going to die within 24 hours. And you can even write down the method on which they will die. But if you just write their name down, like, it's going to happen, and method is not specified. These gods of death are just like, okay, so let's see what happens when humans get this like really weird power thing that can sort of control life and death to some extent. And of course, our hero, and I'm putting hero in big quotes here, Light Yagami, stumbles on the death note. And so he uses it to start killing criminals, like the worst of society. However, the police have started noticing a pattern that somebody must be causing the deaths of these criminals in some weird way. And so they send this unorthodox detective, only known as L, after Light Yagami. Well, he doesn't know at first that it's Light Yagami, but he's trying to figure that out, right? And what's significant about L is that his name is never really revealed. So Light can't write his name in the death note, which sort of gives him immunity from Light's worst powers. And so then we have this whole like cat and mouse chase that happens between Light and L. And there's a second death note that comes into the mix where one of Light's friends gets it, and she discovers L's real name, and there's a showdown. And in the end, Light and L both end up getting killed because both of their names are written in death notes. And the gods end up taking back the death notes. So no morals, no lessons. People are messed up, and maybe a cult is formed because of Light in the end.
Yes. And he's also known as Kira, which is like a sort of Japanese version of killer. As it is based on manga, and there's many issues and episodes, and it's a complicated story with lots of characters, and it's very epic, which Wildhorn loves and I love. So it gets a little complicated, but it's really a beautiful story in the end of this gray moral world where there is no good or bad. It's all just the gods messing with us.
Even if we were to stop at the point where Light is killing criminals, I think that already puts him in a very gray zone in this world anyway. But then the fact that Light starts killing the people who start coming on to who his identity is, like otherwise innocent people, now we're getting into real gray zone here.
Even L kills someone to try to catch Light. He's not a good guy. Exactly.
Nobody's really good here, not in the pure good and evil of Starmites or anything like that.
Let's talk about some of our favorite songs or moments from the show.
Where is the Justice functions as the opening number of the show, and it hooked me right from the get-go. So Frank Wildhorn, we both love him. He's great. For those of you at home who may not be up on the Frank Wildhorn lore, his background is as a pop songwriter. And then he came into musical theater. And when he came into musical theater, he was adapting works like Jekyll and Hyde and The Scarlet Pimpernel and Civil War, like really big, epic, dark, sometimes capital R romantic works. So I think that he's honestly the perfect writer to tackle a work like Death Note, because a lot of those kind of big, epic things are exactly the kind of style that he goes for. Plus, I think that the fact that he has this pop music background means that there's already something a little international, a little like worldwide about his style, simply because it's in the pop world, it's not just the American market. It's sort of a cross-national collaboration to produce albums, to put them out into the world. Think about all of the Swedish producers that are out there in the world. Think about like Mamma Mia out there, ABBA out there in the world. Like pop music is a cross-national thing. It's international. So I think that a lot of people who write for pop music sort of have that eye on this international market anyway. But the fact then that he was able to adapt to this material also makes him very right for it. And from that opening number, I don't think that tension ever lets up in the show. it gets lighter sometimes or more intimate sometimes, but there's always this undercurrent of the gods are toying with humans who cannot in this world be morally right or wrong.
I also love that song. And I also really love the song Hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
It's just such a killer song. Frank Wildhorn comes from the pop world. He wrote for Whitney Houston and Natalie Cole, Patti LaBelle. I mean, he knows how to write a killer ballad and he just keeps on doing it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of great music, especially power ballads in this show. Also, he really stays true to a lot of the original music from the anime, which is really beautiful. There's a lot of religious overtones in that music, like with the Kyrie themes and with the gods hovering over everything. You have this orchestral music that lives with the gods, and then more of the rock music that lives with the humans. You have that nice contrast.
When he first cut his teeth on Broadway, it was that big, epic 80s style of musical theater where it's as much based on European models. Eurovision songs would not be out of place in those mid-80s musicals.
Absolutely. And I just think that with his style and with this particular story, it's like a perfect marriage. And I know that his style is not always the most popular in the States, but it is very popular around the world. But I do think that this is such an interesting and perfect match that I wonder if it could be successful here. If it does get a chance to come here, how successful it could be, considering that it has been so well known around the world.
And I think in today's musical theater landscape, having very well-known intellectual property is something that can make or break a lot of musicals right away. And so then I wonder if there's this critical mass out there of people who know Death Note and are fans of Death Note in order to make that Broadway run a viable one. That's why Frank Wildhorn came onto the project in the first place, because he was talking to his son about it. Because Frank Wildhorn's like, I don't know what this Death Note thing is. Like, what's even going on with that? And his son says, oh my gosh, Dad, you have to do this one. Like, it is the coolest thing ever. And that's what brought him on board. So I wonder then if Death Note is still a relevant thing for younger generations, and we're just going to get more and more of a crowd for this. So I would say that a successful long Broadway run of this show is simply just a matter of time.
And I forgot to mention that on the concept album, the singer playing Light is Jeremy Jordan.
Something else that I think would help with a Broadway run, too, is the fact that the show was originally written in English. The writers of the work, they all got together and they said, let's write the best musical we can in English, and then we'll translate it into these other languages where they need to be. So it's not like a work that was haphazardly translated into English, or that doesn't really translate very well, or that works really well in another language, but has the idiosyncrasies of the language wouldn't translate, for example. No, this is a work that was written to be a good work in English, and then it's made an excellent work in these other languages as well. And you can tell that from the lyrics, too. Like, there are some clever triple, quadruple rhymes going on in there that they didn't have to do if they knew that they were immediately going to be translating it. This is stuff that was very intentional and a lot of thought put into it. And I think then that it works as a whole, even before you start getting into the work in translation.
Yeah, and also having watched some of the other different media versions of the story, I think the way that they interpreted the source material for the musical is very good. They took the story of Misa, who is friend or fan of Kira, whose Light's like killer name, a pseudonym, and one of the other gods named Rem falls in love with Misa. And so there's this whole other story about them trying to deal with that relationship and Misa's devotion to Kira. And there is always trouble with writing strong female characters. So they could work a little bit harder on those characters.
This is a man's world in some ways. We don't have that interesting flawed, cool female lead who is a full, well-rounded person who has some interesting character things.
Like, let me die for you, Kira. Let me give up my life for you. That's a little.
Yeah, let's not.
I hope that they get some more consulting, like gender consultants on the show. But at the same time, I do love that there's like this sort of lesbian coded relationship, like with the God Rem and Misa, and there's it makes it like a little bit more interesting, like even if those characters could be better written. So let's talk about what makes Death Note really sci-fi. Like, what is its sci-fi-ness?
So with Death Note, I think this one falls into one of those categories where it's not about the technology that we're looking at. And if we were to apply the humans encountering new technology definition as the marker of if it's science fiction or not, it would fail that. But in terms of the more magical elements of it, about the gods and about magic, even though I don't think the Death Note is ever called magical per se, but it sort of functions like that. Like there's no physical cause and effect we see. It's not like the Death Note is powered by an unobtainium crystal. It's just you write the name in the book and then they die. So I would think that then this would be much more in this place of magic and fantasy in that sense. I would even potentially call it urban fantasy because it does take place in a city and we have very sort of city concerns. It's not like swords and dragons and magic users.
It's dependent on the city because it's kind of like Batman in that way,
Yeah.
It's very city-centric, and it's about ridding the city of crime specifically.
I think the story only works because we're in an urban center with an urban population. And so in that sense, maybe going into even bigger themes about this, now that I'm thinking about it more, maybe it's a metaphor about mechanization or about capitalism, where we don't even really know the effects that we are having on the world around us, where we can buy a tomato for our lunch thinking, I want to just eat a tomato. I need food and sustenance. But that tomato, if we go back, it was harvested by slave labor, or that tomato was grown in unsustainable practices that are ruining the environment and killing people from unhealthy things. And we're at fault because we bought a tomato. I think that there's something about Death Note, too, that has to be urban. It has to be now because of this sort of long-range, unforeseen effect that one person can kill somebody else without any sort of firm line establishing the contact between the two.
Yeah, and also I do think even though Death Note works in a sort of magical way, there are such specific rules involved with it that it does seem almost scientific because there's so many rules. It gets complicated. But even when Light first gets the book and he's like reading through the rules and it's talking about like you have to do it within 40 seconds or within 2 minutes and 39 seconds. And when you're getting it down to you have to do these things within minutes, and it's talking about if you don't write it down, it's going to be a heart attack. And if you write it down, it's going to be, you have to write it down exactly the way you want this person to die. It does feel, even though it happens in a sort of magical way, it does feel more realistic and less magical because you're giving those time constraints and the specificity of it.
I know there's a whole discussion in the fantasy community about magic and about how guided it should be by rules. I've even heard it referred to as like hard magic rules and soft magic rules, where like hard magic would be you put on a lot of the rules about it, and soft magic would be like there are no rules to it. You mentioned that Death Note has these rules to it. Like that implies that it's much more of a sort of scientific, like a hard magic kind of an outlook to it as well.
Exactly. I think that's what tips the scale towards the sci-fi element of it rather than just any fantasy story, which again is fine. We can talk about fantasy. I like to really say why it's specifically sci-fi.
Yeah. And I wonder if in general, and I've got no numbers to back this up, this is just me thinking, but if things that are more urban fantasy tend to be harder magical systems than, say, rural fantasy. And there are probably just as many exceptions as there are rules out there. But, I wonder if something about like our modern world and putting it in this new technology, if it's really then just a metaphor for our technology and our systems in place and our laws and rules and regulations and economics, which seem to have these like incredibly complicated rules that will determine if people live or die.
How would you compare these two shows, Starmites and Death Note?
Wow. It's like if we took all of these different variables for both of these shows and we just cranked them in the opposite directions. So Starmites is original material. Death Note is based on manga that became anime, that became a series, that became fan fiction, that became all of these different things. So there's so much other source to draw from that. Starmites is a very American work. It started in America about American comic books, an American story. That's not to say that it can't work in other places in other ways, but at the same time, it's so rooted here. Death Note is really a very international collaboration. We've got American writers with adapting a Japanese work that was staged in Korea and Brazil. For Starmites, you have this very kind of episodic storytelling that mimics the Silver Age comic book arcs. For Death Note, it's basically like half of what the manga is doing because it's such a long arc that is present in the work. So they could only pick half of it. So it's not even like the full story that they're doing, where Starmites is like 15 stories crammed into one, and this is like half of the story. So these works can be seen as such different kinds of things because of their separation in time and space and culture and source and storytelling approaches and even music, where, yeah, like Frank Wildhorn is a pop songwriter, but he's not aiming for that purely a rock sensibility like Starmites does. He's aiming for something that's a little bit more of a crossover with musical theater and even opera, along with the genre conventions that he's throwing in with sacred music and heavier kind of rock feel when it comes to the more immortal world here. And despite that, we really get for both of them the power of the written language, where we get comic books are saving our heroine's life and the Death Note is destroying other people's lives. So if that's not like, yes, opposite takes on them in some ways, but just the sheer power of that is evident in both of them. And so I think that if you were to see them in rep, like back to back at some like wild experimental theater company, I think that you could see them as being distant cousins, but still very related to each other.
And also we have this presence of gods in both. We have Diva and we have Trinculus and we have even Eleanor herself becomes in this sort of godlike status in the same way that Light sort of elevates himself as a god in the world of Death Note. And of course, the death gods in Death Note are present and very present in the world of Death Note. I think that is something I was talking about with the Starmite music. It gives us this sense of we're in a different world. And then with the music of Death Note, we have the orchestra telling us this is the music of the gods. And we have the rock telling us this is the music of the human world. And it gives us that sense of separation between the two. It also blends together when they're close or when they're interacting. So I think that that's one similarity. Also, they're both very heightened.
Oh, yeah.
Their worlds are very, very stark. I do think that there's a lot more humor in Starmites of the campiness and the heightenedness. But I would say that Death Note is camp on just a different level. I love epic camp. Like it's funny, but it's not funny. Just so heightened. It's so epic. Like you can find it really entertaining in a way that's like, oh, it's so over the top. I find that funny, but not like funny, haha, but like I really enjoy that the way people enjoy horror movies. It is a horror story and it's campy like horror, you know. And one thing that I've heard someone say and that I agree is I do feel like there's not enough like literal death on stage, considering it's called Death Note.
A lot of the deaths are off stage. It's like, oh no, this criminal mysteriously died.
More blood. I know that's probably going to add a lot to the production budget. But
if we're talking a Broadway run, though, already, what's a few gallons of fake blood, right?
Just call me, I'll consult. So we like to do a segment that we call Tech Check, which is where we're going to talk about and rate how futuristic or scientifically plausible each of our musical's worlds are. So we'll talk about both of them, Starmites and Death Note. How futuristic or scientifically plausible do we think on a scale from 1 to 10.
Oh. Okay. Would 1 be not plausible and 10 be very plausible?
Yeah.
Okay. So with Starmites, so here's where it gets tricky too, is because I think that there's the actual real things going on, and then there are the metaphorical things as well.
Let's talk about just that when she goes into the sci-fi world. Like,
okay.
Not the scenes where she's home with her mom.
Okay, cool. In that case, I'd probably rate it as like maybe a 2 or a 3 in terms of plausibility. Like everything that she encounters somehow or other like breaks some physical laws that don't actually apply. But if we consider, like, the only reason I'm not ranking it an outright 1 is because if we consider the whole thing to be a dream, or if we consider the whole thing to be like a daydream or some other thing that is just like her imagination going, influenced by all of these comics, if we consider this entire thing to be in her own head, then it is fairly plausible. These are all things that somebody could imagine. And the fact that it's called inner space implies that it would be in her head, sort of a thing going on.
Right.
But if we're considering that this is a real place that she's being transported to, then I would say there's very little physical, like physics, scientific justification for anything that's in the plot of the show.
Okay. And I'm going to say a 1 because there's specifically the finale. The subtitle is "It Wasn't a Dream."
You can say that, but that doesn't mean it's true.
But yeah, I agree with you that the world is not plausible at all, but it's fun. It's super fun.
Yeah.
How about Death Note?
The Death Note itself is not plausible at all. Neither are the gods. Everything else in the show is pretty plausible, though. Like, that's really the only big break from reality that's in here. But it's not something that I can just sort of like brush under the rug. There is no Death Note plot without the Death Note. So it's a pretty glaring problem that we get from this very unrealistic thing. So from the fact that the entire rest of the world is there, and from the fact that the Death Note does function by rules, which feels much more like science. So in that sense, maybe I could give Death Note like a 4 altogether, or even a 3, somewhere around there.
I think I mostly agree with you, except, it's really hard to get past all the really fantastical things. So I would say more like a 2 for me. It's really all about just these gods puppeteering the humans. And I don't see a realistic world much at all once we get the Death Note thrown into the story. It's just absolute chaos. And I don't understand how everyone would be like, yeah, we love... okay. No, I take that back. I was about to say, I don't understand how the whole world would be like, yeah, we love this guy who killed people. And then I was like, wait, Luigi.
Yeah, the metaphors, a lot of people have made that.
Bump it up to a 3.
There we go. Luigi single-handedly tipping the scales of our hard magic rules.
That a bunch of people would be like, we love this guy who kills people. So that was our tech check. Now we're going to interview our guest.
Figurines back in the
I love it.
It's perfect.
If any of your viewers or listeners have a link to a Petri doll, it's the only one we're missing.
Let's get that in the episode.
You just get a bunch of moments of the two of us rattling off the second halves of hot takes as if you had to lock into it.
Love that.
And
to hear the actual hot takes, join our Patreon.
Yeah,
right.
You want to know the first half of the hot take.
What are they hot taking about?
Today's guests are Paul and David Rigano of the Rigano Songbook. They are songwriters and cabaret showmen and also fellow sci-fi enthusiasts. So we're really happy to have you guys.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
And just to connect the voice with the name, can you just say who you are for a second?
Yes, I am David.
And I am Paul. And those probably sounded exactly
Very
the same
similar
if your
to
eyes
the-
were closed.
A slightly higher timbre for David than Paul, but like there's a lot of overlap there. Good luck, listeners at home. Who's talking? Who knows?
Even Sondheim once told me that I have a tenor speaking voice.
Nice.
The king himself.
Guys, why don't we start by just telling us a little bit about yourselves and your connection with sci-fi musicals?
Sure. I do think that when you say sci-fi enthusiasts, that is generous. we both enjoy the sci-fi, but more specifically, we both worked on a few sci-fi musicals.
And I think I probably have a little bit more of an affinity for sci-fi.
Yeah, probably.
Lore between the two of us.
But we both worked on a show called Wild Women of Planet Wongo, which was an immersive, interactive 1960s B-movie sci-fi musical.
Catch all of that?
It's funny because I did my research to stylistically get it right. I was the director, but I would get people coming up to me afterwards who were sci-fi enthusiasts who would recite chapter and verse. I mean, come up to go, so when you had them do this and this bit of sage, that was just like episode 48 of The Twilight Zone. Very frequently, because of the style of it, they would say original Star Trek season 2 episode, specifically say something. And I eventually got to the point where if anyone said that to me, I would just go, good eye.
Right.
There were some specific references, but none as deep as some true sci-fi enthusiasts found in there.
Okay, definitely a normie, as they would say.
You got a pretty popular sci-fi musical under your belt that you in the room for the original production out of town.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is science fiction. I worked on regional production, the world premiere of Be More Chill at the River Theater.
That's definitely sci-fi. We'll be covering that eventually.
My first run of Wongo was the same summer that you were doing More Chill. So both of us were separate from each other working on sci-fi musicals that summer. And then I have since also directed a musical called Save the Robots. Because they were plant-based organic robots, it was harder to tell who was robot.
What's so cool about those two shows that you kind of did in succession or really overlapping with each other is that whereas Wongo was so clearly making fun of that 60s B-movie style, both in terms of like Beach Blanket Bingo, but also The Thing from Planet K or whatever, any of those kinds of 60s movies, Save the Robots was like a send-up or almost an homage to 80s science fiction.
Yes, because it was using music from an 80s rock band, Hagatha.
Fun.
That's a great name.
It is a great name. It's a shame that they're not bigger. They weren't like, oh, yes, of course.
That one.
Because
what was cool with that show, though, was that it was the festival, and our tech guy said to me as we were loading in, the show's called Save the Robots. Is it about the old 80s punk rock bar Save the Robots? And I was like, it is not about that, but it is named after that. It's got a lot of references to that 1980s downtown punk rock sci-fi culture because it uses the band Hagatha. And he knew all of the songs because he was there. He was part of that culture. So he kept telling us, he was like, this is the best show in the whole festival.
love the tech.
Yes, you do want that tech to believe that's true.
We did also both work on a musical that was not sci-fi, but was written in part by Barry Keating. There's a little bit of fun. Flick of 76, a musical catastrophe. Kind of our first professional job.
Collaboration together, for sure.
How did you get involved in that collaboration?
It was Stephen Lockback, who we lost far too soon.
He was my professor at NYU, so I do miss him.
His memory be a blessing.
So we were connected through Steve, and he knew, I don't know if they had come to him first and said, would you do this? And he was like, no, but
I know this 17 and 19 year old.
Sounds about right.
We were in college. It was 2006, which was the 30-year anniversary of the Slick of 76.
Sorry, we should explain. The Slick of 76 There was an oil spill on the St. Lawrence River in upstate New York.
It was
the Canadian border.
At the time, the worst inland crude oil spill. It was a really bad oil spill. 10 years later, in 1986, they wrote a musical for an anniversary festival that was happening at the St. Lawrence Seaway called The Slick of 76. 20 years after that, for the 30-year anniversary, they were putting it up again. To our understanding, it had been done rather quickly. A lot of it was charts written down and using this part and using this part.
It wasn't written to be given to someone else.
Basically, we were hired to put together a reproducible score. We had the script, the original demo CD, and we had all of the charts that were written in various levels of completion. And we were tasked to put together something that could then be used for this 30-year anniversary to put the show on.
And then was that ever published or anything, or they just needed it for the moment?
down it. And I
the show, because the show is hilarious and it's fun and it's great. I don't say that to disparage the show at all. The show was fun and it was what it was and it deserves to live on. If someone wants to publish it, that's fine. But I had no idea what I was doing with Finale at the time. And I was writing things that were not even playable. Like I was a pianist. I knew that these things, I wasn't very good. I was like, well, I couldn't really play this, but it should be in the score because a professional can play this. No.
The other thing is that the show's only been done, to my knowledge, up at the St. Lawrence Seaway. I don't think any community theater in Idaho is.
If your high school wants to do the Slick of 76,
then get in touch with Barry Keating. I'm sure I would be say
it. It's the worst inland crude oil spill in the United States. We were just going to forget about it.
Footnote.
That's right.
In that
is part of that legacy.
There was one time I described a song called The Mucker's Lament, which I will not attempt to sing at this stage of the morning. I was describing it to a friend and she said, do you think that I could sing that? Can you give me the sheet music? I want to sing that at auditions. What I did say ultimately was that because this music was only been produced up at the St. Lawrence Seaway, it's way too easy to track it back to me. I have to get permission first. Barry Keating permission right away. But I was like, I have to have him.
And like, of course.
Truly, that song, so absurd.
Yes.
And so beautiful. That song has no right to be as beautiful, especially in the middle of this silly and weird show. This woman who is pining over one of the people who they brought in to clean up. He's like, a city guy and he's cool and he's cleaning up.
The slick lickers are the technical river cleaner-uppers and she's a mucker. And so she's like a down-homey. It's like the other side of the track.
Oklahoma, like the farmer and the cowhand.
They're slick lickers and they're muckers.
Girl falls in love with a slick licker guy, but they can't be together. It's very two houses both alike.
That's unbelievable and awesome. I love it so much. Just the names alone.
It's just my luck to be born a mucker in a slick licking world. It's just so weird. And then it's like weirdly tugs at your heartstrings.
He's her oil kicking, quick to fight because he ain't chicken. He's so slick finger licking good. It's just hilarious. David Schechter and Barry Keating wrote that show together. And in 2006, when we were both in college, they gave us our first professional gig.
Have you listened to or seen, maybe not seen, but heard Starmites?
I have never seen it.
Yeah,
I have listened to it.
Yeah.
There's some musical riffs in there that I was getting a little nostalgic.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it's not the same, but like this piece takes me back to being in my dorm room working on Slick.
Listen, it's not weird that Moana sounds like in the high school. It's the same guy wrote it. I was first introduced to it at the Helen Hayes High School Theater Awards, which are now called something else because the Helen Hayes Award is actually a thing. But it was like our local high school, our county's high school theater awards. And everyone would anyone who was nominated for Best Actor or Best Actress was...
It was like our very, very, very local Jimmy Awards.
But if you were nominated for Best Performance in a Leading Role, you came and you did a little snippet, a little 16-bar cut or whatever of a song from the show. So one of the young women nominated for Best Performance in a Leading Role by an Actress was from Starmites, and she did, I'm pretty sure it was Superhero Girl, and I just remember being blown away. And then I never heard of Starmites ever again.
And of course, when we were in high school, you couldn't log into YouTube and look anything up, which is why it's taking, at this point, we're like, oh, I can go on Spotify and just listen to
that's Starmites.
Show.
No,
Not anymore.
I found it on.
It was on.
It was.
Now.
It's still findable in places, just maybe not on Spotify necessarily.
I had a friend whose high school did it, so I heard about it from her, but I never actually heard any of it. And I was, Starmites, that's that show. And I knew that it was about a girl who goes into the comic, but I had never heard any of the music. So this was a really good excuse for me to be like, I'll finally listen to Starmites now.
Still don't fully understand the plot, I'm afraid. I get the labyrinth thing. She makes a wish and goes into the...
Yeah, I wish that I could somewhere... I bet someone's high school production is on YouTube.
I bet we should just gotten out a bottle of wild turkey, taking a shot every time we heard a Barry Keating one night.
Watched some really fantastic performing arts high schools, like tech. The kids have crazy tech in their school shows.
Like, I wish I could be jealous, but I'm just thrilled for them.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit both. I teach at these high school theater conventions, and so much of the time, like, you are really booked to the gills. You're teaching when everyone else is teaching. And I see the full breakdown of all the courses being offered to these kids. And I'm like, I go to any of these? It's so crazy. And I teach a directing class, and I get a lot of kids who want to direct, but also I just get a lot of kids who are into the backstage stuff coming to my directing class. And I'm like, what's your role? What are you here as today? Are you an actor? Are you a writer? Are you a director? And I get kids being like, my school's A2. I didn't know what an A2 was until our friend was doing it on Broadway. These kids are doing that. When we were in high school, the stage manager was also in the show.
Yes.
Like, and I'm sure that there were schools that were more advanced, that were doing things on their tech side that was more than what we were doing.
I think the other really beautiful part of that is that when we were coming up, and even beyond that, I remember the narrative was sort of, theater is so much fun. It's great to express yourself and, expand your horizons and work on your imagination, blah, blah, blah. And you can still be involved and not on stage. It was always like an afterthought, whereas now it feels like we are doing two things. We are acknowledging the very real
creating a show through tech theater.
Exactly.
So I bet that there's a high school who really knows how to do it upright with the tech, has a fantastic Starmites on YouTube.
We also, this episode, we're talking about Death Note. I know, again, it's not completely available online exactly, but if you've had a chance to see or hear any of that show, what your thoughts are.
I've listened to some of it. I was not familiar with the manga at all. I think my experience listening to it so far has been like, we love a Frank Wildhorn power ballad. We love some Frank Wildhorn skrelting. And I say skrelting in
not as a pejorative.
Yeah.
Of course. No, it's beautiful skrelting.
In called for.
Yes. And when it's Linda Eder.
And usually in a Wildhorn show, it's probably called for.
I think this is a good time to start a more rapid fire kind of question and answer section. So we've got a bunch of short answer kind of things that we think would be fun to talk about, and quizzy kinds of things, or things just sort of like to think a little bit more about.
The first question we have is, if you could choose any comic book to make a musical out of, what would it be?
Those Little Orphan Annie comic strips.
Right. It's going to be big, I tell you, big.
It's so happy that you even went to the Sunday Funnies, because I was like trying to think, I was like, ooh, that's really interesting.
You know what?
I think
because we heard that this was being done and started writing a spec song for it. But we never finished writing the spec song because we could never actually find who we would have to get it to. But Archie Comics, someone has the rights to do Archie Comics as a musical. And when last we had heard, and for a while we were trying to follow it again to see who we would have to get in touch with, there had been no composing team on board. So I'm going to put this out there officially.
Yes. Anybody knows anything about an Archie Comics musical, we are the guys to write.
So science fiction has a lot of tropes associated with it. Sometimes it's things like spaceships. And because we're taking a very inclusive view of science fiction, it can even be things like fantasy tropes, like the dragons were long disappeared and now they are returning kinds of tropes. Of all of the kind of sci-fi, fantasy, speculative fiction stuff, is there some trope out there that you think can use some rehabilitation?
There is no way that every bad guy has the worst training program for all of their, stormtroopers or whoever. Let the bad guys hit things once in a while. Make it real. Make me work for it. Make the hero really be in danger.
That's great. Absolutely.
Good point. And speaking of bad guys, we want to ask, who is your favorite supervillain? Doesn't have to be from a musical or anything, just in any media.
Although now I'm interested in who your favorite musical theater supervillain is too.
The same answer for me from both. If you're opening this up to the fantasy world, then it is and always has been Ursula the Sea Witch.
There we go. Perfect.
There's so many that I love. Like, shout out, special mention to Vulture from Spider-Man. The Vulture, excuse me. I think the one that I'm going to land on, he's my favorite because of how well crafted he is Syndrome from The Incredibles.
Yeah.
He is just like a nice guy who didn't get what he wanted. You know what I mean? And like, we're seeing that everywhere. He was just enthusiastic about something in a way that was dangerous to himself and others and was told to stop, and he threw a hissy fit. And that rage fueled countless lives. Who knows how many people in that big final battle.
But I'm
were
also
hurt.
going to add from superheroes and comic strips, not from musicals, but boy, does this dapper person deserve a musical, The Penguin.
Well,
Yeah.
Penguin musical would be awesome. All right. So what kind of musical style would a Penguin musical be in for you?
Prohibition age jazz.
Full on going 1960s TV show version with the purple top hat, like the full, and a little Danny DeVito. I think that's also Danny DeVito's best roles, the way he disappeared into that role.
And then I want to ask Jonathan, do you have an answer?
I don't know why I'm on such a Dr. Doom kick lately, but there's somebody who is just very smart. He's in charge of things, so he's also very responsible for his people. And also just one little twist, and suddenly that like otherwise potential for good and for making the world a better place just turns on a dime and becomes something that is so destructive. Yeah, give me your overpowered forces of pure evil kinds of guys too. They're fun, but the ones that really stay with me are the ones that like they're so close to doing the right thing and being the good guy in this, and they're just not. I love that.
I was kind of thinking about Poison Ivy that way too.
And many depictions too. Poison Ivy is the good guy. What's the new Harley Quinn animated series where they're in a relationship? She turns. She's a good guy in that one.
Which is a very believable arc for her because her initial intent was.
Yeah. And then my answer is, of course, Skeletor, who is the greatest supervillain of all time and super gay.
I was going to say, I had to try.
Which, a lot of villains are gay coded, but I think like he's gay in like the most fabulous way, as are all the He-Man characters. And another thing I learned recently is that the person who created He-Man was inspired to create Skeletor from going to Long Beach, California, and seeing a real dead body hanging in a museum who happened to be Elmer McCurdy.
No,
is the subject of Dead Outlaw.
Wow.
When this podcast is coming out, but if Dead Outlaw is still running,
It will be.
No, right. No, it's closed by now.
Sorry, but maybe on tour.
Since the cast album part 1, give us the rest of it.
Give us the rest.
So we have a little game that we want to play. We were going to do Name That Tune on Theremin, but you can't hear the theremin.
It's just off camera. Like
Zoom.
here it is.
Yeah. So we have a backup game, which might be a little more challenging.
Like shout out to Be More Chill. To this day, I'm pretty sure the only Broadway show to have a theremin in the pick.
That's
Nice.
fantastic.
But the new game is we're going to turn any show, any musical, sci-fi by changing a word or phrase or maybe the concept of it. So, for example, The King and AI.
Or, and this is like real blunt force on this one, Cats in Space.
Yes. Oh boy. So I'm gonna start this by saying that we have a collaborator who we've written a couple of musicals with who would be so damn good at this. Mark Eugene Garcia, if you're listening to this, you are so sorely missed right now.
This is also an Amanda Nicholas game.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Amanda Nicholas.
Yes.
Brilliant writer as well.
I just
Okay.
came up with another one. How about a little flight music?
This is so funny. I was just about to use a little of my music. When I was in college, I wrote an arrangement. It's just something that I'd always heard and I wanted to write down. I still haven't heard this played by live musicians before, but it sounded like the end of the prologue, the overture to A Little Night Music, could go perfectly into the credits music for Star Wars. So I wrote an arrangement for string quartet of that so that I could hear that happen. And it was called A Little Jedi Night Music.
Nice.
Oh, love it.
Yes, that's it.
Kiss of the Spider Man.
There you go.
How about Fiddler on the Moon?
Sounds crazy, no?
That poor little village of Anatevka. The citizen's
he
just getting
jumps
pushed
all
further
the
and
way.
further out.
Yeah, but a little village of B153X. Like going down through like just my deep musical theater history well in my brain.
I host a trivia night once a week, and once a year we do exclusively Broadway themed trivia the day after the Tonys. And this year, one of the categories that we were doing was Franken musicals, where we take two musicals and mash them together. So all of my brain power for coming up with clever musical titles went into that.
Please tell me one of them was Do, Re, Mi, and My Girl.
Oh, that's
Next year.
I did have, and I ended up not using this question because it's just too insane and stupid, but it was the roar of the grease paint, the sweet smell of success.
Yes. That's a good one.
Because the thing is, you not only have to come up with that, but then like I have to give a clue so they can guess it. Like I have to describe the musical using the plots of both those musicals.
I'm going like in my head, just so that you know what the thought process is. I'm like just going like by composing team and just going through the full canon. Be like, nope, nothing, nope, nothing, nope, nothing.
Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Starfleet.
Ooh, yes.
That's really good.
I can picture that one too. That's a good one.
This is also giving a little bit of insight into our writing process. Paul is the gag writer.
That's true.
Not that I've got no wordplay, and I certainly do. But a lot of our writing is like me writing up to a gag and then Paul writing the punchline. Or Paul coming into it going, I've got a gag, and I am not figuring everything else out.
I've done it many times.
Westworld side story.
There it is.
Yeah, great. Okay, if it's Oklahoma assimilate, then we're talking the Borg for Oklahoma.
The Borg is a similar. I knew it was like a hive mind thing.
Oh yeah, it's one of those like the machines will hive mind out humanity and give into Starfleet's worst impulses thing. Like I get that. It's fitting with the theme because like the whole thing about Oklahoma is who is in our community and who isn't. And if the Borg is there, then clearly it's
the Borg.
We will. Oklahoma's the Borg. That's canon now.
Lynch directed that last scene after Judd's death. Spoilers in the revival.
Spoilers.
That was very Borg-like.
8-year-old spoilers.
Yeah, that's species 8472 lying at their feet because you can't assimilate them.
Have you seen, I think it's called Slay, but I could be misremembering it. It is a gay vampire drag queen movie. And
no, is it a musical?
It's not.
Although we can't talk about that.
No.
It's so wonderful. And anytime they kill one of the vampires, they disappear in a puff of glitter.
Naturally.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Well, those are all our fun little questions. Is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners about yourselves, your shows, your website?
This could be the opportunity to plug anything too.
Rigano Songbook for all of our everything. So that's on TikTok, on Sky, on YouTube, Instagram. We put out a series called Audition Tips We Wish You Knew. So if that sounds like the kind of thing that you would be interested in, head over to TikTok and Instagram and you can search hashtag audition tips or hashtag ATWWYK. We do have a couple of musicals out there in full on YouTube. One that I think is kind of sci-fi adjacent, which is our heist musical, Get the Duchess, which is in the technological vein. We have some fun hacking and things going on. And then
there's also our fantasy musical, which is, it has magic in it.
We are in the workshop stages for our musical, Awaken a Sleeping Beauty musical, which has magic and dragons and spells and fairies and then sword fighting and
all the stuff you expect.
Yeah.
And then there's this
awesome
young adult novel that we have the author's blessing that we can't talk about because we're not great yet. But that was going to be good.
So listeners, stay tuned. Once we have more information about that, we'll start posting about that too. So we're looking forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you, David and Paul. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely.
And we hope to do it again soon.
This was real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on our exciting journey through inner space and the world of Death Note today. Join us next time when we're going to talk about Superman the musical and SpongeBob the musical, where we're going to talk about superheroes. Very exciting.
You can find us on most social media by looking for Sci-Fi Musicals. And please become a patron on our Patreon. You can also follow our blog at sci-fimusicals.com.
And if you have anything to say about any of these shows that we talk about, if you've seen them, if you have something to say about the sci-fi elements of them or the writers, please feel free to leave comments anywhere about this. We love comments.
And you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us and listen for Sci-Fi Musical Podcast.
And subscribe. Tell your friends.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.